We'll take the photo right after. Want to take the photo right now?
We're just posing for photos. Eventually we'll get around to talking.
We were very fortunate last minute. We were very fortunate last minute that we were able to have the confirmation of Tim Draper, who's one of the most famous investors in the world, and his Latin American partner, Ignacio, and his other partner that's here. Where's Diego? Raise your hand here. So they are too important, and we had their confirmation last minute. So I would like to excuse myself from the panel. I want you to have. I want you to enjoy Tim twice at the time, because we're very fortunate to have him. So you're gonna have more time for questions.
No, we need you.
Wow, fast one. Wow. I did not expect this. Wow. Just pull the chair right around.
Tim is here.
Okay, we can get a quick round of introductions from everyone. Let's start with you.
Great, I'm Tim Draper. I'm in the venture capital business. We invest in early startups when it's a girl, a guy, and a dog. And eventually they become either nothing, but they move the ball along, or they become something extraordinary. And we're trying to make big changes in the world. So, I love seeing so many people who have the power and passion and excitement to make a big impact on the world, because that's what we do.
Well, I'm Nacho Plaza, former fintech entrepreneur, founder of the Fintech Association in Argentina, for 4 years president. But now the future of fintech is AI plus blockchain. So now venture capital is partnered with him for 8 years now. We're self-fund together, and we invest in deep tech, including AI and blockchain in the thesis. And we do early stage first check in bio, space, AI, blockchain.
Hello, Michelle Paslich, nice to meet you. I am a fan of Tim Draper. And I'm really excited that you're here, and I'm intimidated by having you in the panel, but I think all of you are in for a treat. I advise startups in the Web3 space, we'll talk a little bit about what that is, and try to help enterprise and investors navigate the landscape to better capitalize on everything that these gentlemen are building.
Hello everybody, Ben Dichtügli, Swiss Mexican businessman or whatever. Thank you for having me here. Basically my project of my heart is a reforestation, a socio-economic project I have in Campeche, so planting trees and giving back something to the Pachamama, to our earth. But then by turn of life, like many times, I ended up to have developed a fantastic blockchain we'll talk about.
Okay, Tim, I want to start with you. I'm trying to understand what blockchain is, since that term got unleashed on the internet. I have no idea what it is, what it means, and what is it used for. So Tim, you can explain it to someone.
It's pretty simple, and it's been like 20 years. Have you sort of read the...
Treat me like a 5-year-old. Treat me like a 5-year-old.
Okay, read the Satoshi white paper. It's fantastic. Easy to read, most of it. And you'll learn all sorts of things. Anyway, okay, I'll take you through a whole long story. I met this guy in Korea, and he said, hey, everybody in Korea is playing this game. It's called Legends or something like that. And no, Lineage. It's called Lineage. And everybody was playing it, and he said, yeah, we got like half of Korea on it. And then And I said, well, that's great, you know, whatever. And it's a massively multiplayer game. And then he said, and I'm buying my son a sword for his birthday. And I said, wait, why are those two things connected? What are you talking about? He said, well, the sword is a part of the game. I'm paying $40 for it so that my son has a sword so he can play better in the game. And I started to think, okay, so there's going to be a world where we live in that's here, that's in IRL, in real life. And then there's going to be this world that we live in that's virtual, that we also participate in, and it's going to have an economy, and it's going to have, and people are going to buy and sell things in that world, and it's going to have its own money. So I put that away for a while. That was 2004. 2011, I had somebody come to me and explain Bitcoin to me. And I said, well, that sounds great. I'll buy some. And I'll invest in your company, and everything was great. And then he lost, a lot of weird things happened, but he basically lost it in the Mt. Gox fiasco. So he lost, I had 40,000 Bitcoin that I bought that disappeared somehow. I don't know where it all went. But Mt. Gox was the biggest exchange for Bitcoin at the time. And they stole the money, but they didn't really steal it. I think they kind of lost it. And so they lost the money. And then I thought, oh, too bad. That was kind of interesting that they had come up with a virtual currency, a currency that could be used in that cyberspace world, that seemed to be really secure, but somehow this trading system messed it up. And then I thought it was gone. But Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin only dropped about 10% on the news that these guys lost all the money. So I thought, oh wow, people must really be needing this. They must be using it for something. And so I did research, and yeah, they were using it for guns and drugs and all that stuff. But then they were also using it for remittance. They were using it to pay, companies in the US were using it to pay people internationally that didn't have bank accounts or just wanted to pay them more directly. People who were unbanked, people who were not a part of the system, that were only operating in cash, could now be a part of the system and part of the economy. And they were very excited about it. And so I started to feel this, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And then I dug in further, and I realized that, you know, what is money? It used to be shells, and then it was gold. You guys talk a lot about gold here. I'm thinking, that's like ancient history. I don't quite understand why anybody cares about gold. You can't buy Starbucks coffee with gold. You can't buy a McDonald's cheeseburger or a taco out here with gold. Maybe they take an ingot just for fun. But anyway, you could buy it with Bitcoin. So anyway, then I thought, okay, this is great. Everybody seems to really like it, so let me dig in deeper. So then I figured out that this is a trusted third party, which used to be the bank, or it still is a bank, but the banks are getting less trusted. If you were a Silicon Valley Bank customer, you would probably say banks are not secure. So I thought, okay, well, banks were the trusted third party because if I raised cows and you grew oranges, how would we trade? It's like, okay, here's a cow, I want 300,000 oranges for my cow. But you know, I'm not going to hold 300,000 oranges. It doesn't make any sense. I want like 5 oranges. And then store the rest or do something with the rest. Turn it into orange juice. Well, you need the bank to say, I'll store that for you. I'll store that information for you. And that's what money was. That's how they created this money. And the money then made it so that we could all trade and do all this interesting stuff, and we could all be a part of this amazing thing that we've turned into an economy. And so since we've all done this trade and we've always had this third-party banking system, in our lifetimes, nothing has changed. But if you go back a century or two, it has changed significantly, because they used to hold packets of gold and weigh them, and then that was what you did, and then it was the promise of gold, and then it was, finally, we got this incredible banking system, which was fantastic, and has worked for our entire lives. But now there's something better. You do notice that the biggest buildings here are all banks, right? Okay, your money is going, it kind of, your oranges go to the bank, and some of them get back to me, and a lot of them stay in the bank. Well, so the banks have this ability to make a lot of money on your money, and that's fine and great, and the banks provide a wonderful service, but now we can do all that in software. And the banks have been controlled by governments, and so governments are actually kind of in on the deal too, because they can print their own money. They can make money out of nothing. But now we have this other thing. We've got Bitcoin. We can actually have money that doesn't have to be sitting in a bank. And we can store it, and we can trade with it, and we can hold it, and we can leave it in a bank. Now they just changed the law, so now you can. But what's really cool is this does not require the government and does not require a bank. So you can do real business without a government or a bank. And that is what Bitcoin is all about. Now, what's good about that? Well, it's really good for those 2 billion people who were not banked because they didn't have enough money, or they wanted to work outside of the system or whatever. So 2 billion people now are a part of the world economy that weren't before, or could be, can be, potentially. And so Bitcoin's really important. So let me tell you something. When Silicon Valley Bank went out of business, it was a Thursday, and I got 15 calls from entrepreneurs. They said, you got to bail me out because I got to make payroll, and I'm personally liable for payroll for at least 2 and sometimes 4 weeks, depending on where you were in the cycle. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it, but it'll be tough terms. I'm a venture capitalist after all, right? I swim with sharks. And so when that happened, the US government bailed them out. And after that, I thought, okay, all of you businesses, whenever we fund you, you have to have a treasury department now. And the Treasury Department should put some of the money in big banks, and they all go, yeah, that makes perfect sense, but in the big banks, they're safer. And some in small banks, and they say, well, why small banks? Well, because the US government can bail out the small banks, maybe not the big ones. And then some in Bitcoin, and they say, well, why Bitcoin? Well, if suddenly there is a moment where we say we no longer want dollars or pesos or whatever, Bitcoin's the only way you're going to be able to make payroll to those people who you owe the money to. And so now I'm actually thinking that to be a responsible citizen, you have to own some Bitcoin. To take care of your business, you have to own some Bitcoin. If you are managing a family and taking care of their money, you should probably have at least 6 months of Bitcoin to keep that family afloat for 6 months. If you are managing a government and you are a treasury, and the US has finally figured this out, you should have some Bitcoin in your treasury. So whether you're a nation, a company, a family, or even an individual, you should have some Bitcoin. It's a hedge against inflation, it's a hedge against bad governments, it's a hedge against the banking system that is more hanging by a thread than you think. And it's just it's an easier, frictionless way to do business. And I'm looking forward to the day where I can raise a fund all in Bitcoin, invest it all in Bitcoin, have my startups pay their employees and suppliers all in Bitcoin, and have and the taxes paid all in Bitcoin, and the whole thing on a smart contract. And if you have done the math here, you realize that would mean that I would not have to pay for an accountant, an auditor, a lawyer, a tax lawyer, a bookkeeper, a transfer agent, any of those people that are a huge part of my payroll now. And I can operate the entire venture business without that friction and provide even better, I mean, we can provide pretty awesome returns, but even better returns than we do. If you give me one more question, this panel will be over.
So what you mean by like reducing all the friction is that probably the term sheet will be written by an AI agent, reviewed by an AI agent who's a lawyer, and then...
well, you don't actually need the...
Separate AI agents, okay. So
you wouldn't need the AI involved because you'll have a smart contract built in. So all the money would run through the smart contract. You would automatically get it. So the contract would be in the software and would not even require that AI agent. But since you bring up AI, okay, something really cool happened to me. I met an entrepreneur who said, our AI can do all of the work for prosecution or for the defense and come up with the best possible argument. And I said, whoa, you can do that without any lawyers or anything? No. Yeah, and it'll be the best